the hum of needles at midnight. Tonight, I'd like to bring you back to a dim, brick-lined basement beneath a textile factory in wartime New York. The year is 1943. Fluorescent lights flicker above oil lamps, casting soft halos over long tables lined with sewing machines. There's the scent of worn cotton, machine grease, and bitter coffee, barely masking the chill in the air. Your fingers are stained from ink and thread, but they move on instinct now. Rhythmic, practiced, silent. You're not alone, yet no one speaks. You sew late into the night because uniforms are needed. And you never say you're tired, because someone has to keep going. Have you ever felt like you can't stop? Like admitting you're exhausted might unravel everything you've worked to hold together? Do you wear usefulness like armor, always available, always dependable, yet quietly wonder if anyone truly sees you? You don't have to answer, just listen, and let another lifetime speak for you. This is sleep through lifetimes. Each night, we let the current of time carry us, while the mind drifts lightly across the surface of memory. Whether you're already comfortable or still finishing something, that's perfectly fine. No need to analyze or focus. Just let everything unfold as it is. Where and at what time are you listening from? Drop a line below. Perhaps someone far away is journeying with you right now. Before we set off, I don't need likes or subscribes. I only hope that if you drift off midway, your sleep will be calm and your heart as light as a leaf. All right, let's allow the road ahead to tell the rest. A quiet girl in a loud world. You're born in the narrow back bedroom of a rented tenement flat on Mott Street. The windows rattle even when no wind blows. Your family is large, 5 siblings, one grandfather who never speaks, a mother who hums lullabies over boiling pots, and a father whose voice rarely lifts unless he's talking about work. You learn early to step aside, to make space, to be small. There's nothing particularly dramatic about your childhood. And maybe that's what makes it invisible. You're the kind of girl teachers forget to call on. Not because they dislike you, but because you're always quietly doing what's asked. Your shoes are always polished. Your schoolwork is careful. You make the bed for your little brothers before school, and you never leave the butter out too long. You learn how to move without being noticed and speak without ever taking up too much air. When other girls at school laugh loud enough to be remembered, you smile softly and turn back to your stitching, practicing straight hems on scraps your mother brings home from a garment shop. There's something soothing about the way needle and thread move, like breathing. Clean, purposeful, a rhythm where no one can interrupt you. At home, the radio is always playing. Your father listens to baseball scores while reading about unions. Your mother folds laundry in time to the news. Slow, tragic updates from Europe and the Pacific. You listen to, even if no one asks your opinion. You take it all in and press it down somewhere quiet. It isn't that you lack opinions. You simply don't know what to do with them. Or maybe you do, but it feels safer to stay neutral. You become good at offering help without voice, affection without burden, presence without pressure. People begin to rely on that. By the time you're 16, you're already working part-time at a bakery, dusting loaves with flour and packing crusty bread into wax paper. You don't complain when your shift cuts into schoolwork and no one really checks. Your teachers note your neat handwriting and your punctuality, but never ask if you're tired. You always say you're fine, even when your feet ache, because compared to others, your father working double shifts at the dock, or your mother hauling laundry up and down 5 flights, it feels selfish to admit anything else. You start to believe that comfort is a privilege for other people, and that your job is simply to keep going. Be helpful, be steady, be grateful. At church, Mrs. Allegra says you'd make a fine wife someday, quiet, obedient, skillful. You smile politely and thank her. You don't tell her you're not thinking about marriage. Not because you don't want love, but because you've learned it's best not to want anything too loudly. Even the things you daydream about. Being a seamstress in a proper shop, opening a small tailor stall one day, stay tucked inside your notebooks, hidden between recipes and scribbled addresses. You become very good at hiding things. Thoughts, needs, tiredness. Even your joy comes out in quiet ways. A good cup of tea, a button sewn perfectly, a song sung low while ironing collars. And then the war begins. It doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in, at first, headlines that grow bolder, classmates who stop showing up, ration cards replacing groceries. You don't panic. You simply adjust. That's what you're best at. When your eldest brother enlists, your mother doesn't cry until she's alone in the pantry. You hear her through the thin wall, but say nothing. You cook dinner that night, quietly. When the second brother goes, you're the one who prepares his socks and hemmed shirts. You don't ask questions, you just keep doing. The city starts to change. More uniforms on the street, posters of Rosie with her rolled up sleeves. Factories doubling shifts. People need workers. Women, especially. You're 17 now, small hands, precise stitches. No one even interviews you for the job. They simply hand you an apron and point toward the workshop. You leave your bakery shifts behind. You tell your mother you'll bring home scraps. You don't mention the way your heart beats differently, standing in that hallway the first day, surrounded by steam, sweat, and the relentless hum of machines. You only say you're lucky to help. Because even now, even as the world shifts and shouts, you don't speak of what's inside. Of the hopes, the wariness, the ache that hums beneath your calm. You just begin. And for years, you will not stop. The war calls everyone, even you. You begin waking before the sun. The hallway outside your apartment smells of dust and something fried. And the building creaks like it's been holding its breath for too long. You wrap a scarf around your head, pin your collar neatly, and walk down 5 flights past Mr. Salvatore's snores and the scratchy sound of a neighbor's phonograph still playing something slow from the night before. The walk to the factory isn't long, but it feels like a crossing. Past corner stores turned into ration depots, past newsboys shouting headlines in voices too old for their age, past the line at the church basement where women wait for powdered milk. You don't speak to anyone. You hold your bag close. You move quickly. You've always been good at arriving without drawing attention. The building is loud before you even enter it. A hollow thunder of sewing machines, metal carts, steam from irons, and the constant drone of voices layered like fabric. The uniforms you make aren't decorative. They're stitched for soldiers, officers, mechanics, medics. Most of them will be worn into fire or blood or rain. You don't ask where they go. You just sue. They assign you to the lower level, where the ventilation rattles and the oil smells sharp. You're surrounded by rows of other women, young, old, loud, silent. All of them chosen because they have fast hands and fewer options. You learn quickly. Each stitch has a regulation. How many per inch? How far from the seam? How tightly to knot? You don't complain. You don't laugh. You count the seconds between each needle strike and fall into rhythm. It's not beauty you're sewing. It's duty. But even that feels like a kind of quiet pride. At first, your mother worries about you working so much. But when your father's health dips, breathless coughs that echo down the hallway, she stops asking. You become the anchor of the house. You pay rent. You buy soap. You bring home flour. Your little sister gives you her drawings. Your brothers send short letters from the base. And your mother kisses your forehead without words. That's enough. Sometimes your body aches so badly you lie down on the kitchen floor before bed. Not because it helps, but because the cold tile reminds you you're still there, still holding together. Your boss at the factory never learns your name. You're just the quiet one in row 5, but she notices your output. Precise, consistent, no errors, no redos, and so your assignments grow harder. Officer coats, lined capes, reinforced cuffs. You say yes to everything, always. When a girl from another department collapses from exhaustion, the others whisper about quotas and sabotage. You sew a little faster that day. Not because you're afraid, but because you don't know what else to do. There's a kind of math to your days. 8 hours of sewing, 2 hours of errands, 1 hour of cleaning, sleep if there's time, repeat. You sometimes imagine your life as a long line of thread, pulled taut between needles, looping through days until the spool runs out. Your hands start to crack from the detergent and fabric. Your nails bleed. You learn to tape your fingers. No one notices. You don't expect them to. The factory begins running night shifts. You volunteer. Not because you want to, but because they ask so little and you've forgotten how to say no. Besides, the quiet of night work feels gentler. The machines hum lower. The women speak softer. There's less pretending, less smiling through things you don't feel. You start to enjoy the rhythm of it. The way silence creeps in after midnight. The way you can hear your own breath between tasks. There's something sacred in those hours, even when they hurt. Sometimes, when the lights flicker, you think of the soldiers who will wear the uniforms. You wonder if they're scared, if they're colder than you, if any of them are your brothers, or someone else's brother, or someone with no one left to call them home. You never write letters. You don't have time. Or maybe it's something else. You're not used to your own voice on paper. You've become an expert in staying unspoken, in keeping everything pressed down and ironed flat. One night, your younger brother writes from Europe, just a postcard, 2 lines. We're fine. Tell Ma not to worry. I miss her soup. You carry that card in your coat for days, like it's something fragile. Some proof that what you're doing matters. That week, your father coughs harder. Your mother sleeps sitting up. You fold his shirts carefully, sew a button on his old wool coat, and place an orange in his hands when he forgets to eat. No one asks if you're okay, and you never offer it, because you're not the kind of girl who needs rest. You're the kind who just keeps stitching, even now, decades later. Maybe you don't know how to do anything else. The room beneath the factory. You work in a basement that hums like a living thing. The machines never really sleep, and even when the power cuts, the building groans and settles around you like it knows its own exhaustion. Pipes run along the ceiling like veins. The floor is always dusty, even after sweeping. The air tastes like fabric and rust, and the light bulbs dangle low, casting long shadows onto the walls. The first thing you learn is that the women here don't stop moving. There are stories, sure, whispered across tables and shouted over the noise. But the work is constant, as if the world outside will collapse if one person takes a breath too long. Most of the women wear scarves to keep the lint out of their hair. You do too. Not because anyone told you, but because you watched and understood. That's how you've always learned quietly, precisely, without needing to be told twice. There's a woman named Agnes who hums show tunes while she works, even the sad ones. She wears bright lipstick that somehow stays untouched by the dust. When she laughs, it's loud and full of something that feels like defiance. Then there's Marjorie, older, graying at the temples, who has been in factories since the last war. She's always telling newcomers, where to put things, how to fold thread, what tea helps with sore hands. You don't say much to them at first, but you listen, and they start to notice that you listen, that your seams never split, that you fix the bobbin without complaining. One morning, Marjorie leaves a small jar of hand balm on your machine. No note. Just there. You nod at her across the table. She nods back. It's enough. The supervisors pass through sometimes, clipboards in hand, tapping fingers against metal. They call roll. They bark quotas. But in the basement, the women look out for one another in small, unspoken ways. A shared thermos, a needle passed across without a word, a spool of thread left where it's needed most. There's no music here, just the mechanical chorus of sewing machines, like a marching rhythm that never ends. Sometimes you start tapping your foot in time without realizing it. Other times you hum so softly that even you can barely hear it. It's not glamorous work. You don't wear a uniform, you make them, stitching insignias for ranks you'll never hold, buttoning collars for shoulders that may never come home. But the garments matter, not because they're beautiful, but because they protect. Wrap, shield. You remind yourself of that when your back aches and your fingers sting. You whisper it to yourself like a small prayer. This matters. Lunch breaks are short. Often, you eat standing. A hard-boiled egg, an apple, sometimes just bread with sugar pressed into it. You don't mind. You've grown used to hunger being something backgrounded, like the H in your legs or the ring in your ears from too much noise. Sometimes girls cry in the bathroom. Sometimes they come back from break and don't return the next day. No one asks why. You all just sew a little faster. You notice small things. How the damp leaks into everything. How the thread changes slightly with each new shipment. How your own hands have become calloused in shapes that match the handle of your scissors. You could probably stitch a uniform in your sleep now, and maybe you do, sometimes, in dreams stitched with the same gray-green cloth, with rows of faceless men waiting in silence. One evening, during a quiet moment before shift change, Agnes looks at you and says, "You're the stillest person I've ever met." She's not mocking you. There's something like awe in her voice. You just keep going. Like one of those little clocks that never need winding. You don't know how to respond to that. You smile just slightly. You don't say that it's not stillness. It's just what happens when stopping feels dangerous. The war isn't getting any better. You know this because the orders are growing larger, sleeves wider to fit bandages, coats heavier for colder fronts. You adjust, you adapt, you always do. One night, the power flickers and the lights cut out entirely. For a moment, everything stops. No motors, no voices. Just the sound of distant sirens and your own heartbeat. Some women gasp, others curse. But you reach for the oil lamp near your station. the one you always keep filled. You strike a match. Light blooms across the sewing table like a quiet flame of defiance. Someone says, "Of course she has one," and a few chuckles echo through the dark. Then more lamps appear, flickering slowly to life. Work resumes by hand now, not machine, slower, less perfect, but still going. In that dim glow, something feels sacred, like you're part of a hidden temple, and the women beside you are all silent priests of endurance. You wonder, briefly, if anyone will remember you, not your name, but your effort. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Letters in the locker. It begins with a scrap of paper. Nothing grand. Just a torn edge from a packing slip, blank on one side. You find it folded under your lunch tin one day. A joke from Agnes scrawled in pencil. "Send help. Trapped in fabric kingdom. Only coffee can save me." It makes you smile, not a laugh. Exactly. Just a small, reluctant tug at the corner of your mouth. You tuck the paper into your apron pocket. That night, on your walk home, you unfold it and reread it under a street lamp. You're surprised how good it feels to carry something that wasn't a request or a reminder or a bill, just a voice aimed gently at you. The next day you slip a note back. Rescue team en route, bringing biscuits and bobbins. You leave it near her machine while she's on break. When she returns, she reads it with a raised brow and a slow grin. "Didn't know you had jokes in you," she murmurs. You shrug, but inside something flickers. After that, the notes become a habit, a secret rhythm stitched between the clatter of machines. Not every day, just enough. Tiny jokes, fragments of thoughts, occasional dreams scribbled on salvaged scraps of packaging. You never sign your name. You don't need to. And then one day, while stitching the inner collar of an officer's coat, you pause. The fabric is thick, pressed, already stiff with starch and authority. Your fingers hesitate. You tear a small strip from the edge of the brown paper wrapper. You write, "Stay warm." You are remembered. It's not a joke. It's not even clever. But it feels right. You fold the note, stitch it inside the collar with a single loop of thread. Hidden, gentle. Nothing that would show on the surface. You press the seam, inspect it twice. No one will see it, but maybe someone will feel it. You start doing it more often. Not every coat, just the ones that feel heavy, somehow, ones that seem destined for colder places, harder burdens. You never say much, just small phrases. You're not alone. We believe in you. The night will pass. Each message is like a whisper into a storm. You don't expect replies. That's not the point. No one in the workshop knows. Or if they do, they say nothing. The funny thing is, it doesn't slow you down. In fact, you start working faster, more purposefully. The fatigue is still there, but it softens at the edges, like someone placed a warm cloth across your shoulders. One afternoon, Marjorie leans over your station and squints at your stitching. "You always do that extra tuck?" she asks, gesturing toward your collar seams. You nod once, not meeting her eye. "Looks good," she says, then walks away. Maybe she knows, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter. You start noticing how many women here carry their own kind of silence. Agnes hums because no one listens when she speaks. Marjorie snaps orders because she's afraid to stop. Even the girl with the missing finger, Eliza, sews faster than anyone, her stump wrapped in gauze. Never complaining. You start to wonder what burdens they're stitching into their seams. Invisible and constant. The factory air is colder now. Winter creeping in. Your coat's hem is fraying, but you haven't had time to mend it. You sleep in socks. You bring home less bread. One evening, on your walk home, you see a man in uniform step off the streetcar. He looks lost. Not just directionless, but unmoored, as if he's still half in another world. His coat collar is turned up against the wind. You wonder if it's one of yours. The thought stays with you all week, and suddenly the notes don't feel small anymore. They feel necessary. Sometimes your fingers shake when you write, not from fear, from fatigue. But you write anyway. And your handwriting is getting smaller, tighter, more compact. You joke to yourself that you'll need glasses by 30. You're not wrong. One night, you stitch in a note that simply says, "You've survived worse." You don't know where that came from. It just spilled out whole. As you press the collar, you imagine someone in a trench or hospital or train car. Fingertips brushing that hidden loop of thread. Maybe they'll never notice. Or maybe, in some quiet moment, they will. And for 1 second, they'll feel something unnamed rise inside them. You don't need credit. You just need it to land. You start saving paper, cutting scraps neatly, keeping a pencil stub tucked into your sock. Your mother finds one note in the wash and asks nothing. She just folds it, presses it flat, and leaves it by your bed. At night, you lie awake and imagine every note flying off like a bird stitched from fabric and ink, soaring into the world without destination. There's a comfort in that. You've never been loud, but perhaps, in your own way, you've started to speak. And strangely, you don't feel quite so invisible anymore. Holidays on hold, always. Thanksgiving arrives in silence that year. No turkey, no candles, no pie, just boiled cabbage, ration bread, and an onion stew your mother spices with old cloves to make it feel like something special. You bring home a small tin of jam you bartered for at the factory. No one asks how. It's the first thing to disappear from the table. You don't mind. You're used to giving away the best pieces. At work, someone tapes a paper turkey to the wall. Its feathers are cut from fabric scraps, and its beak is missing. Agnes draws a smiley face on it in red thread and names it General Gobbles. It stays there for weeks, watching over the machines. no one gets the day off. The war doesn't pause for holidays, and neither do the quotas. You sew longer than usual that day, not out of obligation, but because the rhythm helps. When your hands are moving, the H in your chest quiets to a hum. Christmas follows with the same hush. The factory gives out small pouches of hard candy. Sour ones that make your jaw clench. Marjorie gives you a pair of socks, hand-stitched with mismatched thread. You pretend not to notice that one has a hole. You wear them anyway. Your birthday passes in similar fashion. You forget it first, until your mother places a candle in a piece of bread that evening. It flickers once, leans into the smoke, and dies. No one sings. You're not disappointed. You stopped expecting those things years ago. You don't tell anyone how old you are. Not because it matters, but because the number doesn't change anything. You're still working the same hours, still sewing the same seams, still carrying the same weight. Sometimes, in the quiet between shifts, you stare at your reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Your face looks older than it should. Not lined exactly, just dulled. Like fabric washed too many times. The same shape, but softer, faded. You start measuring your life in garments. Dozens of coats each week. Hundreds of shirts. You wonder how many men are walking around stitched inside your time. There's a superstition that grows in the workshop, the idea that unfinished garments cause bad luck, so you never leave mid-stitch, no matter how tired you are. You'd rather stay late than tempt fate. Eliza jokes once that if anyone's cursed, it's all of you anyway. But you still finish your seams. Snow falls one morning, thick and soft. You stop on your way in, just for a moment, to watch it gather on the windowsills. Everything feels quieter when it snows, like the city is holding its breath. You think about how strange it is that something cold can feel so peaceful. Inside, the machines are as loud as ever. Agnes starts bringing a small bell to hang on her station. Something salvaged from a broken bicycle. She rings it once every time someone finishes a garment. It's silly, but it makes people smile. You keep a tally in the corner of your notebook, not of garments, of bells. One morning, a boy from the post office comes into the factory with a sack of letters. Most are official, draft notices, confirmations. A few are returned letters from the front, undeliverable. You watch Agnes read hers, lips pressed tight. She tucks it into her boot and keeps working. You don't receive letters. You don't send them, except the ones no one knows about, stitched into collars and cuffs. Those are your voice, your only way of reaching out. And yet, despite the lack of recognition, you never feel forgotten. Not exactly. There's something about the way the women say your name now. Gently, with respect. They trust you to fix jams in the machines, to balance the coffee tin on the uneven stove, to know when someone needs a moment alone without asking. You become a kind of constant, not loud, but anchoring. One evening, Eliza leans over and whispers, "You ever think about what you'll do when this all ends?" You don't know how to answer. Not because you haven't thought about it, but because the future feels like a shape you're not allowed to hold yet. "Yeah," she says, "me neither." You think of the uniforms, of the hands they'll pass through, of the bodies they'll protect, or fail to. And for a moment, the weight of it all feels enormous. But you keep sewing. Holidays come and go. You celebrate through the fabric, through neat rows of stitching, through the warmth of a coat's inner lining, through notes that say things no one has ever said to you. And as the calendar turns again, you wonder if this year might be the same, or if one day you'll learn to rest, not just repair. A girl with braids and a limp, her name is Ruthie. She arrives on a Tuesday morning with sleeves too long and eyes too big for her face. Her limp is slight but unmistakable, one hip dipping lower with each step, as though she's carrying something too heavy for her frame. Someone whispers she had polio as a child. No one says more. You're assigned to train her. It's not formal. Just a quiet nod from the forewoman and a clipboard with Ruthie's name scribbled across the top. She stands beside you like a stray cat, nervous, silent, observing everything. You show her the thread tension, the foot pedal, the way to clip corners without fraying. She nods too quickly, fumbles once, pricks her finger, and hisses through her teeth. You hand her a thimble without a word. She grins. The first few days, she trails you like a shadow. She doesn't ask many questions, but she watches, closely, as if she's memorizing more than just stitches. Your rhythm, your silences, your breath. By the end of the week, she's keeping pace. Her seams are uneven, her collar's too tight, but she's trying. She bites her lip when she concentrates, hums when nervous. It's not a tune you recognize, probably something from the radio, but it sits in the air between you like a thread. She starts bringing 2 sandwiches for lunch and always offers you one. You look like the kind who forgets to eat, she says. You take it the second time she offers. She beams like she's won something. One afternoon, she pulls a folded note from her pocket, creases worn, edges soft. "This was stitched into my brother's coat," she says. "Hay found it at the front. We don't know who wrote it, but it helped him when things were bad." Or your heart stalls. You reach for it, fingers grazing the paper's edge. It's not your handwriting. Not this one. But it could have been. Ruthie looks at you like she's telling a secret. "I think someone like you wrote it," she says. You don't answer. You just hand the note back, gently. From then on, Ruthie becomes more than a trainee. She's your echo, your unexpected tether. She starts finishing your sentences, mimicking your stitching style, even organizing the thread drawer the way you like it, by shade, not thickness. Agnes teases you. She's your apprentice now. Ha! You roll your eyes, but your chest warms. Ruthie asks questions, eventually, about the machines, about the soldiers, about whether you think any of them read the labels sewn inside. You say maybe. You say you hope so. She tells you about her brother, how he writes from the field hospital in France, how he draws comics in the margins, how he once built her a swing from old pipes. She tells you about her mother, who still thinks she's too fragile to work, how joining the factory was her own decision, how proud she is to be here. You tell her small things in return, that you used to work in a bakery, that you like peppermint tea, that your mother sings while peeling apples, that sometimes you forget what your own voice sounds like when it's not being useful. She looks at you then, not with pity, but with recognition. One evening, during a particularly long shift, Ruthie's machine jams. Thread snarls around the bobbin, and the needle snaps in half. She flinches. You're by her side in an instant, fixing the jam with practiced hands. She watches closely. I panic, she admits. Every time something goes wrong, I feel like they'll send me home. They won't, you say softly. You sure? You hesitate. Then, you're better than you think. It's the first time you've said something like that out loud, and the words feel unfamiliar, like shoes worn by someone else. But Ruthie smiles like they were made for her. She begins improving. Her seams straighten. Her collars lie flat. She still hums off key, still limps slightly when she's tired. But she holds herself taller now. There's a confidence blooming in her, soft but sure, and one day you catch her slipping a note into a jacket lining, carefully, deliberately. Her face is focused, reverent. You say nothing, but your heart aches in the best possible way. She's learned not just your skill, but your secret, and perhaps in passing it on, you've made something bigger than yourself. Later that night, as you walk home, snow flurries gather at your lashes. You think of Ruthie humming, of the note in her brother's pocket, of how a single thread can bind more than cloth. Maybe, without meaning to, you've become someone's memory, someone's mentor, someone's scene. The shift that wouldn't end. The blackout hits just after dusk. 1 minute, the machines are humming, the iron hissing steam, the women murmuring through mouthfuls of dry cookies. And the next, everything stills. The fluorescent lights sputter twice and die with a hollow pop, plunging the basement into heavy shadow. No one screams. That's the kind of fear you had at the beginning of the war. Now, panic feels indulgent. Someone fumbles with a match. Agnes swears softly. Marjorie mutters something about the grid being unreliable again. You reach under your station and retrieve the lamp you've been keeping full all winter. 1 strike, 2, and it flares to life, casting a golden circle across the nearest table. Shadows leap, stretching up the walls like long, forgotten memories. Others follow your lead. In a few minutes, a dozen small lamps and candles flicker across the room. The air smells of wax and warmed oil. Ruthie stands beside you, wide-eyed, her fingers hovering above the fabric she was cutting, was stopping. You glance around. The silence is thick, not from fear, but from uncertainty. Without machines, there are no quotas to chase. Without light, there's no supervisor watching the clock. It's the first moment in months when the world feels paused, but only for a breath. You shake your head. We're finishing this batch. Someone laughs, short, surprised. By hand, you lift your needle, thread it cleanly. We've done worse. Ruthie grins and sits, and just like that, the room shifts. Slowly, the women return to their stations. Pins clink in tins, thread unspools. Hands resume their quiet purpose. The ticking of a pocket watch becomes the new tempo. Eliza counts it out loud, keeping rhythm. Agnes hums a carol, soft and off-key. Marjorie passes around an extra lamp, wick like it's contraband. You sew by feel as much as by sight, running your fingers along seams, trusting muscle memory more than your eyes. You'd think it would be frustrating, but it isn't. It's calming, like falling into a pattern older than machines. Like remembering something your grandmother once taught you before the world turned loud. The room is quieter now, yet more alive. The voices are gentle, the laughter less brittle. Without the urgency of engines, the work becomes almost ceremonial. At one point, Ruthie asks, "Why does this feel important?" You look at her. Because it is. Because these coats are for a shipment headed to a recovery unit near the front. Because someone's son, brother, husband will wear them while learning to walk again. Because your fingers might be the last kindness that brushes their skin before everything hurts. But you don't say all that. You just murmur. Some things are meant to be finished. Around midnight, snow begins falling again. You can hear it against the windows upstairs, soft, steady, like someone tearing paper in long, careful strips. The air in the basement grows colder. One of the girls lights a bundle of fabric scraps in the metal bin by the door. You all take turns warming your hands above it. Marjorie pulls out a flask. "For courage," she says, pouring a thimbleful into each woman's palm. The liquid burns down your throat like truth. You glance around. These aren't just co-workers anymore. These are women who have shared silence and stitches, grief and laughter, hunger and oil, stained bread. You know their stories, even if no one has spoken them. You know the limp in Ruthie's step, the tremble in Agnes's hands, the way Eliza favors one arm, the way you, yourself, forget to blink sometimes. The coats are completed before dawn, each one folded, checked, tagged, and stacked near the back wall. No one cheers, no one claps. The accomplishment is too quiet for that. Instead, There's a long exhale that moves through the room like a shared breath, like something was held in for too long and finally released. You sit back, brush a curl of thread from your lap, and look at your hands. They're red, raw at the edges. A thread of blood seeps from your thumb where the needle slipped. You hadn't even noticed. Ruthie hands you a handkerchief. "You're bleeding," she says softly. You nod. It happens. She doesn't press. Instead, she says, "That was the best night I've ever had." You smile. Not big, just enough. Because it's true. Not because of what you made, but because of what you held together. The room, the rhythm, the resolve. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't the task itself. It's the decision to stay when everything says you could leave. And that night, without light, without heat, without thanks, you stayed. You didn't say you were tired. You just finished what you started. A letter finds its way back. The war doesn't end with a bang, at least not for you. It ebbs slowly, first in rumors, then in headlines, then in the absence of orders. The factory floor begins to quiet. Machines fall silent for hours. Threads are used sparingly. The urgency that once gripped everyone begins to loosen, though no one says it aloud. Then, one Tuesday, a letter arrives at the factory. It's not addressed to a name, just to the women in the uniform basement, from one who wore your work. The forewoman reads it aloud during break, voice raspy with emotion, as though unused to the taste of something so tender. The letter is from a soldier named Thomas Whitaker. He served in France, was wounded, spent 3 weeks in a hospital cot wearing a coat that smelled faintly of lavender and oil. He writes, inside the collar, tucked into a seam, he'd found a note. "You are not alone. The night will pass." He says he read it every night, that it felt like a hand on his shoulder, that he believed it had kept him alive. You freeze. That's your handwriting. You remember that coat, the size of it, the way the fabric had a stubborn ripple near the hem. You remember writing that exact note after working 3 shifts back to back, fingers numb, eyes heavy. No one looks at you. No one knows. But your heart is thudding, full and hollow at once. The forewoman tapes the letter to the breakroom wall. Some women cry. Ruthie stares at you for a long moment, then says nothing. Later that day, when you're alone in the supply room winding thread, she slips in and leans against the shelves. "It was you, wasn't it?" You hesitate, then nod. Her voice softens. "You saved someone. You want to say no, that it wasn't like that, that it was just a few words, just a habit, just a way to stay sane. But you don't say any of that, because maybe it was all of those things, and maybe it was enough. That night, on your walk home, you carry yourself differently. The streets are the same. The cold, the snow, the thin crackle of distant radios. But inside you, something shifted. Not pride, not exactly. Something quieter. something truer. Proof that your small, unnoticed actions echoed beyond the basement. That your voice, however quiet, however hidden, had been heard by someone who needed it. You begin to imagine where your other notes may have ended up. Tucked under uniforms, buried in trunks, pressed between medals and photographs, carried through mud, through snow, through fear. Maybe some were never found. Maybe others were. It doesn't matter. They were sent. And now, somehow, one has found its way back. In the following days, the other women begin stitching messages too. Ruthie leads the charge, of course. She writes poems in thread margins. Eliza embroiders tiny stars in inner seams. Agnes writes entire lines from songs, off-key lyrics woven into uniform waistbands. It becomes a quiet rebellion, a patchwork of voices in a world still too loud, too cruel. And you write one more. This one goes into a navy blue officer's coat. The collar is stiff, the fabric thick, and your fingers ache. But your writing is clear, confident. If this found you, then you've already survived more than you know. Keep going. You're not invisible. As you press the final seam closed, you feel something loosen in your chest, like a knot that had been holding you up, but also holding you back. At the end of the shift, Ruthie says, "You ever going to sign one?" You shake your head. "They don't need my name." She grins. "Maybe. But it's nice knowing who cared." You smile in return, small but steady, because maybe that's all you ever wanted, to care, quietly, steadily, without applause or spotlight or recognition. And for once, it feels like the world has whispered back, "Was saw you?" The war ends, but you don't stop. The sirens wail in celebration this time. Flags appear in windows overnight. Strangers kiss in the streets. The factory bell rings for hours, off schedule, off rhythm, because no one knows what else to do. The war is over. But when you arrive at work the next morning, your hands still remember the shape of a cuff. Your fingers reach for scissors without thinking. Your spine stays stiff, ready. There are fewer garments to make now. Shipments dwindle. Some women leave without even collecting their last week's pay. Agnes doesn't show up one day, then never returns. You hear she married a returning pilot. Eliza moves back to Indiana with her sister. Marjorie retires. The floor grows quiet. But you don't stop. You offer to mend uniforms for the museum downtown, ones worn by local boys. Now on display behind glass. You patch a bullet hole without asking where it came from. You re-stitch the lining of a jacket with a familiar tug in your chest. You don't ask whose collar held your handwriting. You take work from neighbors. A widow 2 floors down asks you to hem her husband's old trousers into something she can wear in the garden. A teacher brings in a ripped satchel, and you fix it like new, adding a secret smiley face in thread behind the flap. Word spreads. Quietly, of course. You never put up a sign. You've never needed to. Children start bringing you dolls with broken arms and jackets that won't close. You stitch them while they sit beside you, watching, eyes wide, as if sewing were a kind of magic. You suppose it is. Ruthie visits once a week. She's working at a hospital now, organizing linen and comforting returning soldiers with bad dreams and worse scars. She still walks with a limp, but her posture is tall. She brings you thread when she can spare it. She still hums. You never ask if she still stitches notes into the sheets. You suspect she does. One day, she brings you a coat. He says it's just a tear, she explains. But I think he needs it fixed right. The coat is worn at the elbows, frayed at the cuffs. You run your hands over it slowly. In the lining, your fingers brush something folded and tucked. A note, yours. You open it slowly. The paper is soft from age and wear. The ink is faint. The night will pass. You don't cry. You're past that. But something inside you goes still. A kind of quiet that isn't emptiness, but peace. You stitch the coat gently. Strong seams, hidden reinforcements, a new lining. And when you hand it back, Ruthie smiles. He'll feel it, she says. You hope he will. Evenings stretch long now. You walk slower. You notice the way shadows fall across the stoop. How the ivy has begun climbing the brick outside your building again. There's time to notice things now. You teach the neighbor's daughter to sew buttons. She's clumsy, but determined. Like Ruthie once was. You watch her fingers fumble and correct themselves, and feel something like continuity. You never throw away thread. Every piece might be useful. Every scrap could finish something. Your mother's hair is mostly gray now. Your father's cough has faded into memory. The world moves forward, fast and noisy. But you stay steady. Not because you're stuck, but because you've found meaning in stillness. Sometimes you hear your own voice softly when you mend. Not out loud, not quite, but present. Full, certain, you begin to wonder if maybe rest isn't about stopping. Maybe it's about sewing at your own pace, for your own reasons, with no deadline, no order, no silence to fill. Just the simple, sacred act of making something whole again, a final garment, a final thought. Years pass, decades really. And yet your hands still remember the shape of a shoulder seam. The world outside grows louder, brighter, faster. Radios turn to televisions, newspapers turn to screens. The city breathes in pulses of neon and car horns. Children don't recognize half the tools in your sewing box, and that's all right. You never expected your pace to keep up with theirs. You're older now. Not old in the fragile sense, just worn in, like the coats you once repaired. With edges softened by time, you move slower, but every gesture remains precise. The thread still slips between your fingers with reverence. The thimble still fits. You don't sew as often, only when asked. A patch here, a button there. Small things, quiet things, things that matter to someone, even if no one notices. Then, one autumn, a letter arrives, not handwritten, typed, official-looking, from the Historical Society, requesting your help restoring a military coat from the Second World War. A donation from a veteran's family. They say the lining is fragile, the seams coming undone. They heard you might understand how to work with it. You stare at the envelope for a long time, then nod. The coat arrives 2 weeks later, folded neatly in brown paper, as if it had just returned from the front. Its navy wool, brass buttons dulled, thread brittle with age. Inside the collar is a small loop of uneven stitching, a patch where someone once tucked a message. It's not yours, but it could have been. You breathe in the scent of old fabric, sunlight, and the ghost of coal smoke. The weight of memory hums beneath your hands. You begin with the hem. Slow, steady stitches, each one an echo. You reinforce the lining, rebuild the collar, replace a button with one salvaged from your own collection. A match so perfect it feels like it waited decades to be used. And as you work, memories return like distant bells, the clatter of machines, Ruthie's humming, Agnes's lipstick, Marjorie's flask, the sound of scissors on linen, the hush of blackout nights. A letter on the breakroom wall. You pause often, not from fatigue, but from awe, that all of it still lives somewhere inside your fingers, as if the story was never gone, just folded, tucked gently away. When the coat is finished, you press it one last time, not for wrinkles, but for gratitude. You write a small note and place it in the pocket. You don't sign your name. You don't need to. This coat held lives. May it hold memory, too. You seal the package and walk it to the post office yourself, one slow step at a time. Later, at home, you sit by the window, your mending basket nearby, full of pieces you may or may not finish. The late afternoon sun spills across the floor in warm ribbons. The kettle whistles once, then quiets. You sip your tea, stare out into the quiet street, and you wonder, not wistfully, not bitterly, just with curiosity, what would have happened if you'd allowed yourself to rest earlier? If you'd said, even once, I'm tired, would the world have unraveled? Would anyone have taken your place? Would the notes have stopped? You smile. Probably not. But you also know something now. Something it took years to stitch together. Rest isn't weakness. Stillness isn't silence. And the smallest threads, the invisible ones, are often what holds the whole garment together. You don't need applause. You never did. But in that moment, sitting alone, a gentle breeze brushing the curtains, you allow yourself a final, honest thought. I did enough. And for once, without shame, you whisper, I'm tired. The softest thread, the ache in your hands comes sooner now. Your fingers don't move the way they used to, but there's still rhythm in them. Just slower, more careful, more sacred. Some mornings you wake and forget the day of the week. but never the feeling of thread gliding between fabric. Muscle memory, lifelong memory. You don't sew much anymore, but the needles remain where they always have, in the same tin box, with the frayed velvet lining beside spools of faded thread in colors no longer made. They sit by the window, catching sunlight like relics from a quieter world. You're surrounded by small things, a jar of buttons, a cloth tape measure curled like a sleeping cat, a tin of chalk that still leaves a faint line. There's a quiet dignity in these objects. They've outlasted noise, trends, years. Sometimes you dream of the factory, not as it was, but as it felt. Warm light glowing from oil lamps, Agnes's laughter, the clack of scissors, Ruthie humming something soft as the snow fell beyond the basement walls. It's always winter in those dreams, not cold, just still. You never had children, not by choice exactly, just by circumstance, timing, the rhythm of a life shaped by necessity. But there are plenty who remember you. Neighbors, now grown, who still wear the clothes you mended. Ruthie, who writes every month. Strangers who once found a note tucked into their collar when they needed it most. They remember, and that's more than enough. Your name is written in thread, in seams, in kindness left behind, quietly, gently, the way you always lived. And as your body slows, your mind wanders through years like pages in a book already well read. You don't rush. You linger on the good parts, the funny ones, the moments where your hands shook not from fatigue, but from meaning. One day, as the afternoon light dims into gold, you take out a piece of fabric, just a square, soft, familiar. Your fingers move over it, not to make something new, but to remember what it meant to make anything at all. You thread the needle slowly, knot it without looking, and you sew one last line. You don't know why. No one will see it, but still, there's comfort in that final motion. The fabric folds like a sigh. You set it down beside you. And then you close your eyes, not in sorrow, not in fear, but in that sweet surrender that only comes when everything you gave was enough. You might not remember any of this tomorrow, but the dream will go on.